Title: Whispers from the Unknown. Author: Paul Chelby. Narrator: Joe Callum. Chapter 1. Not that I truly felt unwell, no. Not that I truly felt well either. But I don't know. My life exuded death, perhaps even worse. It lacked any scent. In fact, it didn't even smell foul. I found myself torn between a past that stirred nostalgia within me, though there wasn't much to be nostalgic about. From a tender age, I realized the present was rather constricted, and my happiness was envisioned in a future that likely would never come to pass. Such was the magnitude of difference. Thus, I oscillated between a past that evoked nostalgia and a future that instilled anxiety, yet I suppressed that scream of terror, that panic which at times made me wish I had never existed. Yes, how does one live agreeably when one comprehends, truly comprehends, that in the end, inevitably, one will perish? Even just a cut on my finger ruined an entire day for me, so the notion of meeting one's end, and to top it off, should I have spent my life saying yes and smiling like a fool, content with my lot, going to church to thank God for this marvelous gift called life and for all that He denied me on a daily basis? Perhaps they gave me the wrong incantations, or the old man was losing his faculties, needing a new hearing aid. My name is Gabriel Hesse. I resided in one of those vast western cities where wealth grants one the authority of a child constructing and deconstructing his Lego world at whim. Such is life. With wealth, one can disregard everyone without it being deemed vulgar. I didn't possess much wealth, but hey, I lacked that obsession. It seemed to me that an intense attraction to wealth caused one to forget many of life's existential anxieties that gnawed away, only to be replaced by a substantial neurosis that dictated one's thoughts, actions, and existence, all for the sake of that good old big fat stack of cash. The modern man was inevitably associated with, or at least gave the impression of being associated with, money, cash, heaps of dough. This allowed him to exude confidence and project self-sufficiency onto the rest of the world with a certain legitimacy. Well, essentially, at that juncture, I was unemployed, devoid of ambition, and lacked any genuine desire to acquire such ambitions. My days revolved around a few unstimulating activities like strolling, watching television, playing tennis, or similar pursuits. Strolling was a consequence of overdosing on the small screen and lacking a sports partner, playing wall tennis akin to self-indulgence in front of a mirror. Thus I meandered for hours through the streets like a lost soul, a ghost feeling remorseful for no longer even frightening children. In essence, I was dreadfully bored most of the time, despite the urban density characteristic of such colossal cities. The ennui born of inactivity leading to a rather insidious loneliness proved to be an exceedingly painful and arduous trial. A job, even a menial one, at least prevented one from spending excessive time alone, for it was during such periods that one realized someone or something always lurked nearby like a shadow. Now I shall recount a segment of my story, or rather the story of my life, but not at any ordinary moment, when I was born at 28 years old. I could have commenced by stating, "My name is Gabriel Hesse. I am 28 years old, and I have just been born." Chapter 2. Seated at home, I waited. Oh, I waited for nothing, but patiently, without rushing, tranquil, as the idiots say, in slow motion, almost in a state of self-hypnosis. But a self-hypnosis so successful that even in sleep, my brain was more engaged. This lack of action, I don't even speak of adventure anymore, made me sick to my stomach, to the point where I didn't know how to face it anymore. I dreamt of a deep depression, the kind of depression that brings you to your knees in tears, and at least has the merit of allowing you to touch the depths, a way of offering you a chance to rise again. Well, that's what I thought. How did others bloody do it? Why was my life losing its sparkle day by day? Was I solely responsible for this existential bankruptcy, or could I share it with society? Anyway, the important thing was to move towards change, and if possible, the right kind of change. Well, I understand myself. I often tried to bring a little order and light into my mind by searching for ideas, solutions, anything. Those that would plunge me into this strange world of happy people. And I'm not talking about normal people because for me, normalcy was crap, always has been. In fact, I was convinced I wasn't cut out for existence. Just as some people feel powerless in the face of math problems, well, I didn't have the same excitement for life. I was in a way the observer of my daily life, the witness to nothingness, and a testimony no one gave a damn about. Something unusual, crazy, or nothing had to happen. Several options were available to me. To commit suicide, a stool, and a rope. It wasn't complicated, it was even simple. I could have left a letter to absolve anyone who might have thought they bore any responsibility. A beautiful letter. Mom, Dad, my brothers and sisters, my friends, I'm bowing out. I hope you won't hold it against me too much. There are no specific reasons pushing me to throw in the towel, but having lost the taste for life and not necessarily wishing to regain it, I'm stepping back. This decision was well thought out. It's even the result of deep reflection. Yeah, right. Then I would have tried to add some beginnings of justification, that my balls weren't big enough, that after an hour of walking I systematically had sore feet, or that I had Sharon Stone's ambition with the physique of Pee-wee and the intelligence of a dolphin. But yeah, a dolphin is very intelligent, incredible, and my ass shines. The end would have been a long and touching declaration of love, aimed at all those whose gaze still hinted at my existence, even if only a little, or for some, a lot. No, what would have suited me more would have been to go rent a porn or horror movie DVD, just to take my mind off things. With a bit of luck, before getting chopped to pieces, the heroine would have gotten some action from a sadist, which could have allowed me to give my stick a good rub. Bloody hell, more crappy fantasies. Or do something crazy, spend everything on the spot, trash my apartment, sell everything I owned, which wasn't much, and just take off like a madman. Go on a trip, the kind of trip others talk about. Leave to put an end to this existence that only brought me desolation, loneliness, and boredom. Leave far away before going to pieces right here. That moment will forever be etched in my memory. I had just felt something immense, something colossal. I was both petrified with fear and at the same time awestruck. I wanted so badly to break away from this useless life, to finally feel the magnetic currents of existence, to have a future that was more starry, more dangerous. I realized that to do that, I had to lose control to interfere with this reality, to let my entire being express itself. Either I reasoned with myself like a good old loser, looking for a few good arguments worthy of Mrs. Denis, and condemned myself to continue this pathetic story, or I stopped believing I was smart enough to make the right choices and threw myself without thinking into a great journey, or rather a great quest whose only purpose was to find the latter. The most terrifying thing was this mental mirror I couldn't escape from anymore. A mirror that was supposed to reveal. An anxiety of unspeakable power made me want to cry like a baby. In that state, I could have pissed myself or thrown up on my shoes. The hours that followed were a veritable descent into hell. The demons of my sadness and melancholy, which I had always denied passage to, all emerged at once. Painful sequences, images, voices long buried, everything resurfaced for better or for worse. I had no choice but to release all this crap. Dizziness, discomfort, my condition deteriorated and led me to unconsciousness. I lay on the floor. It was a violent mental shock. The pain was so intense that it made me forget this cognitive struggle on the verge of schizophrenia. A period of intense turmoil that I barely remember followed. Emerging from the depths of this ocean of pain, I brought back a life buoy, an idea, an obsessive idea. You're probably thinking that all this reflection happened very quickly, and that things never happen like that in life. Wait, close your eyes, relax your whole body, royally bore yourself for 28 years, and open them again. Anyway, I don't give a damn about your opinion. Chapter 3. I put on some upbeat music like Latin. I didn't really like it, but I felt more open to the world when I listened to that kind of stuff. Hand on my belly, and there I go. I danced alone like a big idiot, closing my eyes and murmuring some pseudo-Spanish gibberish. After about 30 seconds, having felt no sensation remotely resembling pleasure, I took a clean blank sheet of paper and started writing to organize my thoughts a bit. So, where to start? Inform my entourage. Why not? But if it was just for them to look at me like a dog that can't poop or a little baby who hasn't burped yet, then screw it. It was about a change of life, not a late adolescent crisis that needs to be taken to a psychologist who will tell their parents to buy them a moped or a flute. That's right, they can shove their flute up their asses deep down. I would do this like a man, a real one. I'd slip away quietly, and my return would be all the more grandiose. I went to the bank to withdraw all the money from my accounts, which, anyway, brought in a pittance. "Don't let your money sleep, make it work," said that bitch behind her desk with her legs crossed, her tiny, ridiculous tits, and that damn ugly face. God, she was ugly. I would have loved to punch her in the face, that bitch. When I finished emptying my accounts, I felt like I had been violent, like I had cursed her whole family. It was unbelievable. I had withdrawn 3,000 euros, which is next to nothing for a bank, and that customer assistant, as they call them, judging by her face, was terribly embarrassed. I just noticed that since she had darkened, fantasies crossed my mind. I imagined her naked with her tiny ridiculous tits and big 70s secretary glasses, filling out her account closure forms. Some people are so ugly that you can easily imagine their inner world. Behind her bourgeois appearance hid, I was sure of it, a big whore. A big whore who liked sucking dicks without being able to explain it to herself. I greeted her and pushed open the door of her office with determination. I already felt freer. I had no bank account left, and I had sent by registered mail with acknowledgement of receipt my letter of departure from this shitty apartment. Oh, the mailmen and all their gang who spend their lives delivering toilet paper. Go fuck yourselves. The paranoid landlords and their friends working. In real estate agencies, go fuck yourselves. And finally, the bailiffs who make their living thanks to all these idiots incapable of agreeing, go fuck yourselves too. All my assets were for sale on the internet. I had arranged with my neighbor Lucy for her to take care of my plants, telling her I was going on vacation for a few weeks. I stuffed into a huge backpack the essentials to follow my destiny. Off to battles with crocodiles, chases in the desert, gunfights. No, I'm kidding. I was idle but not completely stupid. I bought a plane ticket that allowed me to do the equivalent of a round-the-world trip over a period of 3 years. Mentally, I was ready. Materially, all I had left to do was to settle a few technical details. In short, I had scheduled my departure for a week later, and nothing seemed to stand in the way of this trip. Things were progressing. During that week, I organized several parties in my apartment. I invited the entire building to come and celebrate. The first evening was memorable for many people. Many of my neighbors, whom I didn't even know, came and turned out to be very nice people. This evening, which I would describe as special, was an opportunity to thank Lucy for agreeing to keep my plants for a more or less extended period. During the night, I participated in all the drinking games and quickly found myself completely drunk. Talking had become something different. Lucy was the last ear to listen to me, and her kindness moved me. That night, looking at her from a new angle, I was overwhelmed with a tremendous desire to mount her with the concrete block I now had between my legs. Things happened quite naturally. Looking back, I think she had always been more or less in love with me. So finding ourselves on the bathroom floor, wriggling awkwardly like two larvae, no longer controlling their cries of pleasure, covered by a Rolling Stones best of, was not very surprising. The only small problem arose when we woke up. Had Lucy also indulged in various mixtures? But the vomit spread along her neck, ending at her knees, probably came from my excess, not hers. I was truly convinced that foul smell of vomit, I had it in my mouth too. Romance had never been my strong suit, but this was the Grand Gabriel. So aside from this late-night incident, its unfolding had been a success. The problems came with the following parties. The neighbors participated less and less in these wonderfully chaotic gatherings. Probably because of fatigue due to overconsumption of alcohol and other powerful substances. They quickly sent the police as a thank you, and it was hard to deny the facts given the extraordinarily explosive noise volume. The climax of this nocturnal week, in fact, it was the final point of this incredible madness, was the rather violent intrusion of a police intervention group who caught my friends and me in the middle of a giant cocaine rail-taking contest. We called it the Paris Biarritz, and the big loser of this game was my friend William, who got off the train very quickly. I must say he wasn't used to long journeys. All right, we may have exaggerated a bit, but admit that about 20 madmen, 2 dressed as station masters, 1 naked loser with racist inscriptions all over his body, unfortunately of African origin, and the rest of the group howling like wolves, didn't deserve such a muscular intervention. Simply put, bad luck was in the cards. It was a big misunderstanding. Among the 3 officers in charge, the highest-ranking one was the only one to crack a smile upon seeing William entirely covered in correction fluid, realizing the disproportion between the event and the ridiculousness of their presence in this decadent evening. After explaining with some difficulty the reason that had forced me to have such a large sum of money, although somewhat diminished by various expenses that you can easily imagine, we spent the night at the station, and all this resulted in a great deal of unnecessary slapping and a huge fine that further reduced my travel budget. But no matter. We had experienced a crazy week, and that's priceless. Finally free, we all found ourselves in the street, very tired, especially some of us whose energy had slightly overflowed and had to be contained by police lieutenants with very limited patience. William greeted the assembly eagerly. I think he was eager to go home to erase some inscriptions which, I must say, upon calm reflection, turned out to be more than inappropriate. I hadn't informed anyone of my decision to leave. A whole week with friends without telling them the essential, some might find it strange, but I find it bold. On the other hand, the fact that my friends didn't ask me anything about the reasons for organizing all these parties, some might find it strange, but personally, I find it strange. It wasn't important anymore. I was back home. It was 11 in the morning, and I had a few hours to do the final cleaning and leave the place. Chapter 4. The man grabbed my luggage firmly, organized the trunk, circled around his vehicle, probably inspecting it. He displayed great determination, yet there was a certain humor about him. A fierce battle must have taken place on the top of his head. Not a single hair seemed willing to grow back, leaving behind a high and wrinkled forehead. His predatory gaze was slightly obscured by a pair of round glasses perched atop a petite and oddly proportioned frame. I sat in the taxi headed for the airport, tired, no, utterly exhausted. I felt as if my eyes were level with my mouth, my arms capable of touching the ground effortlessly.
"Are you leaving, young man?"
The driver asked me with a clear northern accent. "To Thailand, Bangkok. Well, my plane drops me there, and then—" I hoped the conversation would end there. Exhausted as I was, I felt as if I had just been through a boxing match, knocked out cold.
Ah, you're one of those young backpackers off to explore the world without a care in the world. Can I ask you a question?
my new friend asked with a wide smile. Yes, of course, I hypocritically replied.
Are you left-wing? No offense, but generally, young people like you who do this sort of thing are rather left-wing. I know the drill. I've been in this business for 27 years, seen all sorts of clients, and young travelers like you, especially when you tell me you're going to Bali and Thailand, they tend to lean left like the English.
He burst into laughter, accompanying his subtle jest with a sharp turn of the steering wheel, placing us in the left lane. A bit shaken, I responded. No, Bali is in Indonesia. I'm going to Bangkok, Thailand. The driver interrupted his foolish laughter. A few minutes passed. I could see him staring at me in his rearview mirror, seemingly displeased with the correction I had to make. But undeterred, he continued,
Sorry, it was just a joke. I know Bangkok is in Thailand. We're just joking here.
The atmosphere had changed. This jerk was getting on my nerves. With at least another 15 minutes of the journey remaining, and my new friend eyeing me in his rearview mirror, signaling his desire to continue this doomed conversation, I replied to his question in a calm and soothing tone. To get back to what you were asking, I'm not too interested in politics. I think there's good on the left, as well as on the right. Things have really evolved. There's no longer this difference, these opposing ideologies. The world naturally becomes the least bad of things, soaking up elements and ideas from all sides. And my ass, is it chicken? Oh, what a lovely consensus, Gabriel. I added, carried away by my own momentum. Except, of course, in the extremes. Undoubtedly, a little silly speech often leads to a big mistake. The driver's reaction was immediate.
What do you mean by extremes?
Images of people congratulating me flashed before me. My mother, her large head against mine, admiring with joy the baby with a single tooth that I had become. Some rare moments from my young school days or a meeting between my name and a brilliant grade had occurred purely by chance, all covered in thousands of people applauding, rising to pay homage to that magical moment. There I was in trouble. I, who initially wished for no conversation, had skillfully steered us towards a useless and uninteresting controversy. I remained tired and weary of this situation.
But where you're going, over there in Thailand? They're not extreme. Extremely what, right?
He blurted out with a smile filled with stupidity. He was poking at me, the damn fool. Our two worlds, our two spheres had just collided. My natural respect for the other urged me to ignore this nascent contempt. But deep down, the beast that lay dormant within me put him on the same level as a hermit crab. His jubilation could have given me hives or brought forth a giant boil in the middle of my forehead, but like a Tibetan monk, I focused on my breathing to slow it down. Becoming a bull ready to charge wasn't the right solution, I thought. It's a fact, I told him. I couldn't help but speak to him like a baron addressing his servants or his offspring. The subject was closed for me. Go on, my child, but spare yourself from your big mistake. Fool, you were born, little man, you are naive, above all that I will remain. These poetic but lowbrow thoughts allowed me to escape from this rather unpleasant situation. I felt like a king, rich with the most beautiful of souls. Drive on, Cochet! Take me to meet my destiny, and above all, shut your damn mouth! But the taxi driver raised his sword to deliver what he thought would be a fatal blow.
I didn't study much, otherwise I wouldn't be here. For me, things didn't come easily. But one thing is certain, studying doesn't make you smarter, and anyway, it's full of slackers. I'm sure you've studied a lot. Right?
In a split second, the most violent and bloody cinematic scenes, from old-fashioned throat-slitting to torture sessions accompanied by unbearable screams, flashed through my mind. I wanted to respond to that question, to that smile filled with arrogance, with superhuman force. I would have grabbed his head with one hand, his leg with the other, and torn him in two. I would have spat fire to set both ends of that repugnant being ablaze. There you go. On top of being half sick, I was now in a bad mood. You're just a whore, I coldly exclaimed to him. With hindsight, I still couldn't explain the completely new reaction I had. I no longer wanted to contain this pack of snow dogs forcing me to return their freedom. You've dragged me around enough. I offer you danger and intensity. Take risks, put yourselves in peril, and become the wild animals you once were. I suddenly said to myself. I added, and a pretty whore. My laughter exploded in the car. I abruptly stopped it and fixed my gaze on this man in the rearview mirror. I wasn't laughing anymore. I was focused on him, leaning forward and trying, like a 15-year-old, to hypnotize him. Well, to assume a posture that could have been compared to that of a chicken hypnotist. The taxi nervously moved its head to alternate between looking at the road and its rearview mirror. I widened my eyes even more. Due to the enormous fatigue that had whitened my face, I must have looked like a shaman or a psychopath. Is the difference so obvious? So what's the matter? Don't feel like asking me any more questions? Go ahead, I'm listening, my little chicken. I had just seized control of the situation. Every cubic centimeter of the vehicle's interior was under my command. All of this was achievable effortlessly, or rather, by avoiding any exertion. In the same way one gains strength by consuming a certain amount of whiskey, I had amplified my power over the other. I no longer pondered the means to achieve my ends, but solely focused on my immediate wish, that this little man would shut his damn mouth. Well, that's better, I said, sinking back into my seat. My reaction had been so unexpected that it left the taxi driver flustered. Unsure of how to respond, he seemed bewildered, perhaps simply very frightened. The remainder of the journey was pleasant. The atmosphere was almost good, congenial. Not a word was spoken. Chapter 5. After paying and shaking hands with my balding friend, I even allowed myself the luxury of giving him a friendly wink, he drove off eagerly, ignoring all the potential customers hailing him to stop. That shock, he would remember it for some time. Admiringly, I daydreamed, what an immense fortress this airport with its dragons swirling above it. What? Oh, Gaby, wake up. Let's stop fantasizing. I grabbed my giant backpack, quickly checked the essentials for travel. Wallet filled, plane ticket, unexpired passport, backpack on my back, and off we go. There was a lot of movement. Everyone seemed in a hurry, or at least occupied. Quite astonishing considering that in an airport, all you do is wait. I checked in my backpack, which could have contained the body of an obese dwarf. The attendant took advantage of this to charge me extra due to its weight. During the operation, I noticed that this airline only employed girls who could have danced in strip clubs. They were all beautiful despite their blue uniforms, which made them look like periwinkles. Although, it reminded me of distant thrills in front of certain scenes from a movie with Louis Defoon and his gendarmettes, and perhaps even the Smurfette long before. I forbid myself from attempting anything. What phrase would propose a relaxed atmosphere of mutual discovery? Nervousness didn't clarify my mind. Was she dreaming of talking to me too? Maybe I also reminded her of someone, a character who had made her fantasize when she was younger. Bobby Ewing, Tom Sawyer, or simply this little minx who had spent her life searching for her Gargamel. Come on, Gabriel, find something to say. Damn it, she's almost done writing her note. I examined her in detail to find the saving inspiration. The more I examined her, the more I found her sublime, and the more difficult the task became. I felt a growing sense of panic deep inside me. This Aphrodite was slipping through my fingers. She and her long chestnut hair, that angelic face on that dazzlingly slender body. God had created her to be as beautiful as the sun, and instead of becoming blinded by her, I remained silent. I emitted the vibes of a dumb carp. I had the charisma of the Invisible Man and the conversation of the Incredible Hulk. And then, I thought, apart from giving the macho inside me a good conscience, what would the beginning of a conversation with this girl bring? My plane was leaving in an hour. My destination was the end of the world, and my return was unpredictable. The prospect of anything happening seemed highly unlikely. The only favorable outcome would have been to get her phone number so that upon my return... But what was I thinking? Why dream, or rather fantasize in this way, when a new reality was unfolding before me? Or rather, when I was offering myself a new reality, a new page had been turned, and I needed to keep that in mind. She handed me the papers, I handed her the money, we exchanged smiles, and as I prepared to leave, I turned back and said, "You're very pretty. Under different circumstances, I would have invited you for a drink, but as you know, a plane is waiting for me. I hope our paths cross again someday. Goodbye." I left this princess waiting in this desert. Head held high, I turned my back to her and began to walk away. Other adventures awaited me. But damn it, I still would have fucked that bitch. After undergoing a stupid interrogation to ensure that a terrorist had indeed helped me pack my bags, after going to greet an erotic bombshell and loafing around in a corner of the airport, I was now queuing to board the plane. I immediately noticed a large majority of Asian people. In a flight bound for Bangkok, was it really surprising? The huge queue resembled a big mess. The ground staff weren't letting anyone in, but people felt compelled to stick to each other like suction cups. And if the boarding time lasted too long, and the pilot, eager to arrive, decided to take off, tearing off the boarding aisle in the process. Indeed, if that were likely, let's put unnecessary pressure on ourselves to make sure we're on board an aircraft piloted by a psychotic pilot. My Asian friends passed the time by talking incessantly. Their language, to be honest, was not very pleasing to my ears. Its sounds amplified my already significant headache. I don't know if it was the sounds or the aggressive way they projected them, continuously chattering. Of course, I understood nothing and found the time long. I felt some rubbing on my lower back, probably the handbag of a woman or the camera around the neck of a Chinese person. It's not their fault they're short. After 4 or 5 more rubs, I decided to turn around to identify the perpetrator. So, how to put it? It was indeed a handbag. This one was held by a woman, but how to put it? One of those people surfing the waves of uncertainty and ambiguity. Those people we imagine very young playing with dolls as well as mechanics, and who could drive a fuchsia Range Rover. Well, a fag. Not the man whose ultra-modern femininity, almost exemplary, arouses envy among old-school heterosexual seducers, who cannot help but rely on big muscles to suggest big balls. No, the fag, the transvestite, the mutant from another planet, the fag planet. I had in my circle of friends homo friends whom I greatly appreciated, but I didn't understand these creatures, these transvestites with whom I didn't even know how to communicate. Should I say, madam or sir? Was the transvestite she or he, and could he change like snails? Were there codes to determine gender? If so, which gender were we talking about? The gender of personality or the contents of the basket? Many questions that did not trigger any animosity on my part, but made me distant because the complexity lay in much more than a language issue. As I turned around, I noticed a whole little group. There were 4 of them, all coming from another dimension except one. Most of them had huge hair, and some even had giant brushings. The fashion must have been for very short skirts, and looking at them closely, I had the impression that they were dressing like my mother or my aunts in the 60s. Like the Asian car, they all seemed to be having a good laugh. I had a feeling I wasn't going to be bored on this plane. The groper pretended not to notice my curiosity. His mischievous behavior amused me. As soon as I turned my back, his handbag came into contact with my ass, and as soon as I turned around, he burst into laughter, pretending to be deep in conversation with his friends. Our eyes met, and nothing worked. He enjoyed his double game. After 5 minutes, standing sideways, he easily understood that his game had lasted long enough. He didn't insist. I found my seat on the plane. Given my situation, I shouldn't even think about watching a movie during the journey. The only satisfaction was that I had the advantages of a window seat. A man arrived hastily. His carry-on luggage and his white linen suit suggested that he was a sales representative in the textile industry or a businessman in the fashion world. His clear eyes and perfectly organized square blonde hair gave him a very neat and classy appearance. He stowed his briefcase and extended his hand to me, saying,
"If we're going to spend a few hours next to each other, Jean-Alexandre de l'Espinois. Pleasure to meet you, young man."
We introduced ourselves, and then I saw him go talk to two of the skirt-brushing individuals, including my groper, who was 3 rows behind us. They conversed for a brief moment, and my neighbor returned to his seat after meticulously folding his jacket. He seemed slightly excited and concerned. I asked him, "You're going to Asia on business, I presume?" I spoke like a baron. I needed to correct this timidity that could make me seem cold, and especially for what I'm not, an uptight person. And I added, "Could we use first names?" He smiled and replied,
"Of course, Gabriel. That's your name, right?"
We started a conversation that seemed to relax him. I learned that he indeed worked in fashion, and this was an important business trip for him. He spoke about a sought-after ideological dimension. I must admit that during this explanation, since I understood nothing, my attention focused more on trivial matters of aesthetics or behavior than on the meaning of what was being said. "Oh, really? That's incredible. But how far will we go?" I replied, looking concerned. I asked him, "But behind us are those—" I still had difficulty categorizing them because I didn't want to hurt anyone. "The people you were talking to?" He noticed my discomfort, which amused him, and he explained,
"They're all my employees. They're the best, real killers."
So it was they. Better not to know. He couldn't contain his laughter, so I didn't hold back mine. What I couldn't imagine was that the reasons were quite different. Chapter 6. I was walking down a deserted street where silence bordered on unsettling, making the atmosphere particularly heavy. The buildings surrounding me deprived me of light, and I felt halfway imprisoned. This street was like a giant corridor. No alternative appeared. I had to continue straight ahead, walk, follow this single direction. My discomfort was intensifying. I wished to encounter anyone or anything, but nothing came my way. Resigned, I raised my head to break the hypnotic cycle of this straight line. I saw several shapes in the sky, but I couldn't make them out clearly. As they grew larger, I understood they were strange birds. No, not birds, but winged men. These things emitted inhuman cries that made me sense danger approaching. My fear intensified. I couldn't flee or hide. I let out a roar of enraged beast, perhaps to scare them off, but in vain. I lowered my head and saw an unfamiliar weapon on the ground. I picked it up. It became an extension of my arm. Sending bursts of lightning and flames, I saw them fall one after the other from the sky, now colored with fire and blood. I had unleashed hell. Once my work was done, I approached these burned and mangled bodies. Only one of these winged beings was still moving. I came to its height, and it turned around. It was one of the harassers. Its long, charred wings no longer resembled much. It seemed to implore me not to finish it off. I was struck when I saw myself in the reflection of its large, teary eyes. I saw a demon. Chapter 7. I jolted awake abruptly. It took me a brief moment to gather my senses. My neighbor was nowhere to be seen. He probably went off to chat with his girlfriends or more. The plane still hadn't moved, and strangely, there was no noise. No engine hum, no incessant chatter of Asians. I rubbed my eyes and sat up in my seat. Not a single person around. The place was deserted. "Hey, can someone please answer?" I exclaimed. No response. I stood up and headed towards another part of the plane. Anger was rising within me. How could they have left me like this? As I reached the other section, it too was empty. I shouted. Determined not to let the incident pass, I made my way to the cockpit. No luggage, no belongings left behind. The plane must have been evacuated in a hurry, yet strangely it hadn't affected my sleep. I walked faster, inspecting the area. There's no one here. An eerie sense of cleanliness prevailed, likely due to the perfect silence. But something else was bothering me. I couldn't identify the discomfort. I immediately stopped in my tracks. What's wrong? I asked myself more calmly. I scanned my surroundings, searching, questioning. What's off? I closed my eyes and focused. Worry mingled with curiosity troubled me. I felt nothing. I felt nothing anymore. There was no smell. In a place like this, smells were abundant. Some cleaning products always lingered on planes. 10 minutes ago, this place was filled with them, and now nothing. No smell and absolute silence. Panic engulfed me. I ran to the end of the aisle to get out of this place. The hatch hadn't moved. I needed to change the air. I returned to where hundreds of people had been waiting before. The place was deserted. Rows upon rows of seats were empty. The bars, restaurants, and shops were lifeless. The entire hall seemed to have shut down. Life had left the place. Looking through the windows, the most surreal sight I'd ever seen froze me in place. In the sky, melded into its blue and clouded canvas, an airplane stood perfectly still. It all looked like a photo, so frozen was everything. The other planes on the ground showed no movement either. I began to call out, no, to scream louder and louder with growing rage. A feeling of claustrophobia overtook me. I was going mad. I had to regain control. I had to calm down. This would all disappear. Just a horrible nightmare. Wake up, you're dreaming, you haven't woken up, get out of this crap! I collapsed to the ground and cried like a child. I was scared, and it all had to stop. But the worst anxiety gnawed at me, made me feel this emptiness. Curled up on myself, I wished I didn't exist anymore. These images, this atmosphere, this tragic moment terrified me.
Gabriel, hey Gabriel.
A glimmer of hope appeared. I knew that voice. A man stood at the other end of the airport, still calling out to me.
Come, join us. We're here.
Running in the direction of the voice, I needed to reach it. It was the oasis in this desert, my survival, my balance. The closer I got to my goal, the clearer the shapes became. When I was about 100 meters away, I recognized my neighbor. It was that guy, Jean-Alexandre de l'Espinois. In front of him were several things on the ground that I couldn't yet make out.
So, you didn't miss me?
I replied while advancing. What's going on? What is this thing? Turning my head slightly, I felt observed. I had the strange sensation that someone was hiding. To my astonishment, I discovered that it was lying bodies, and I knew them. They were half-charred, and I knew why. I had burned them. They were the creatures from my nightmare, and the 3 corpses lay in front of Jean-Alexandre. But it was a dream! He burst out laughing, crossed his arms and looked up to the sky. His long blonde hair seemed to have grown. They now cascaded down his back. His facial features were different, finer, his gaze sharper. He exuded a sensuality and energy like never before.
Your dreams are murderous, Gabriel. You should learn to control your fear. Although I'm impressed by the result. From your fear, a power has been born. That's good, but the result is here.
He pointed with his hand at the 3 bodies again and added,
Truly impressive.
At the end of his monologue, his voice had changed and his gaze had hardened. He no longer seemed amused. He said,
It's you, Gabriel. Only you. Your life will finally be yours. Become what you've always been. Stop playing.
I didn't know what to say anymore. His words spoke to me while repulsing me. Many emotions were mixed. Guilt, incomprehension, despair, and above all, a strange fascination. He opened his eyes wide and repeated,
Gabriel, stop playing. Stop playing. Stop.
His voice echoed louder and louder. His eyes became bright, brighter, shining with intermittent light. I couldn't bear these intense light rays anymore. I was blinded. I shielded myself with my arm to avoid going blind. All these bright rays were becoming aggressive. They wanted to penetrate my mind, but I resisted. Again and again. Again and again.